Pronouncements from the climate change global warming spokespersons are greeted as though they are holy relics, far too important to be questioned. The surprise is that they're not handed down from mountaintops carved on tablets of stone. Three people appear to have become the poster children of climate change mythology. Prince Charles, a prime candidate for Hypocrite of the Century, David Attenborough, a television presenter, and a schoolgirl called Greta Thunberg, who's famous for playing truant from school, and seems to be regarded by millions as a new Joan of Arc. All of them and their supporters spend a good deal of time travelling around the world to address meetings and conferences. Well, they did do when you could do that. A decent-sized climate change conference can bring 20,000 enthusiasts flying in from all over the world. The problem is that politicians and journalists are now too frightened to ask proper questions or to deal with the issue of global change in a robust, scientific manner. Interviewers never ask the celebrity global change stars the questions which really need to be answered. The result is that the climate change believers get away with a good deal of pseudo-scientific gobbledygook, which does not bear close examination. The first point, of course, is the unavoidable fact that the climate change spokespersons have very large carbon footprints themselves. Although young Greta famously travelled to America by boat, it was widely reported that the boat's crew had to make at least one journey across the Atlantic by plane. It would surely have been better for the planet if she had simply flown across the Atlantic, but that wouldn't have gathered quite as much publicity. The world would have lost all those photographs of little Greta braving the elements to save the planet. All the climate change personalities travel a great deal to conferences and meetings, but all travel requires energy, and trains and electric cars rely on electricity, which is largely burned by burning fossil fuels. It isn't difficult to argue that the world would be better served if they all stayed at home. There would unhappily have been problems with that, since between 5% and 9% of all electricity used around the planet is used by information communications technology. Aviation only produces about as much carbon dioxide as the world's computer data storage centres, all those banks of servers upon which social media campaigners share their global warming nightmares burn up vast amounts of electricity, and hysterical climate change protesters probably use up as much energy as the world's aeroplanes. Oh, and the climate change enthusiasts who insist on cycling everywhere should realise that bicycles are a major cause of pollution. As cyclists pedal along, the traffic queuing up behind them burns up far more fuel and emits far more pollution than would otherwise be the case. The climate change mythmakers have made many claims about the future of the planet, and it's worth looking at one or two. For example, back in 1989, a United Nations environmental expert stated that whole nations would vanish if global warming was not reversed by the year 2000. In 2009, Gordon Brown, who was Prime Minister, remember once, told us that we had 50 days to save the planet. 11 years ago, Prince Charles stated that we had 8 years to save the planet. In 2017, the United Nations revised their predictions and said we had 3 years left. A while ago, an American politician called Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez stated that the world is going to end in 12 years if we don't address climate change. How do they know this? Swedish teenager Greta Thunberg recently wrote that, quote, around 2030 we'll be in a position to set off an irreversible train reaction beyond human control that will lead to the end of our civilization as we know it. In 2019, she also stated that we have 8 years left to save the planet. Climate change campaigners have forecast that life on Earth is dying, billions will die, and the collapse of civilization has already begun. They have compared global warming to the Holocaust, but on a greater scale. Now, the fact is that you will not be surprised to hear that none of these predictions is ever supported by any scientific evidence, and I've been quite unable to find one credible scientist who's ever claimed that climate change threatens the existence of the human species or the collapse of civilization. I can find lots of 12-year-olds who say it, but 12-year-olds say and think lots of silly things which don't usually get given headlines in the world's press. Talking of children, two things come to mind. First, in the UK, half of all children under the age of 10 are driven to school every day. Or at least they were in the distant days when they went to school and people tried to teach them things. If they really want to save the planet and help improve the quality of the air, it would help enormously if those children walked to school instead. Second, a group of British psychologists have reported that children are suffering from anxiety caused by the frightening predictions made by those predicting that climate change will affect our future and may result in the death of mankind. The self-publicizing celebrities who travel the world spreading doom and gloom might like to reflect on that. The fact is that the global warming campaign is largely led by people who grew up in rich countries and who travel easily and comfortably. They have enough to eat, they have wonderful phones and computers and television. All those things require a good deal of electricity, most of which is produced with the aid of oil, gas and coal. Now those campaigners, whose lives were enriched by fossil fuels, want to stop poor people in Africa and Asia from improving their lives. The fact is that oil and coal will give them their only chance to catch up. The campaigners who want to stop the world using fossil fuels are suppressing the world's poor and condemning them to starvation, malnutrition and early death. That seems to be rather selfish and a hell of a price to pay. Climate change campaigners want to deny poor countries the right to use cheap energy sources from fossil fuels, but they and their countries became rich by using such fuels. If the climate change nutters are looking for a slogan, it should be "Hypocrisy rules." There are lots of things which annoy me about the pseudoscience, which is climate change, and the ignorant pseudoscientists who jabber away about the climate as if they understood anything they were saying. First, consider renewable energy. Well, the biggest source of renewable energy is biomass, the green word for wood. And we have to remember that although wind farms and solar panels get a great deal of publicity, they produce only a marginal amount of electricity. The greater part of the energy which is said to come from renewables comes from burning wood pellets, biomass. And in the UK, most of the biomass is imported from America. So the trees which the planet desperately needs are chopped down, chopped up and shipped to the UK in big ships driven by diesel. And once the trees get to the UK, they are renamed biomass and burned to produce nice, clean electricity. Climate change campaigners want to stop funding so that oil companies will not find more oil. They want to stop us using oil completely. However, the International Energy Agency, which you might think knew about this, has stated that by the year 2040, our planet will still only obtain around 5% of its energy, the energy it needs, from renewable sources, including burning trees. So if we give up using fossil fuels, we'll have to cut back a good deal. No heating, no cooking of food, no lighting, no television, and definitely no laptops and no mobile telephones. If that's what Greta and co really want, then that's fine, but they should perhaps understand what they're asking for. Second, the climate change nutters are forever claiming that global warming will kill off all sorts of animals. Now, no one campaigns more than I do for animals, but I find this quite a bizarre claim. The most popular claim seems to be that climate change will result in koala bears becoming extinct. Well, the last time anyone counted, there were around 300,000 koala bears living in the wild, and the main threat to their existence is the destruction of their habitat, which is often a result of farmers requiring more land upon which to grow biofuels. And biofuels are, let's remember, the fuel of choice for climate change nutters. It's also worth pointing out that the stuff known as biofuel, crops such as corn for example, is known to much of the world as food. By encouraging the use of biofuels, the climate change nutters are condemning much of the world to death by starvation. Incidentally, the climate change campaigners claim that many people will starve to death if the global temperature rises. There is, of course, no evidence to support this claim. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization say that crop yields will rise by 30% by the year 2050. The planet's poorest countries will see their yields rise by 80 to 90%. But the increase in yields will depend upon the use of tractors and heavy machinery, which will, of course, require oil. Rural areas of poor countries will not be able to afford electricity and charging points until they're richer. If the climate change campaigners get their way, poor countries will be forced to stay poor, and the people living in them will stay hungry. Third, climate change campaigners claim that forest fires are a result of climate change. But experts in both Australia and America have concluded that climate change has had little or no impact on the development of forest fires, which are in any case less frequent than they used to be. The average annual acreage of American forest burned is now around 6.6 million acres. Back in 1928, the average annual acreage of American forest lost to fires was 41.7 million. As a mathematician, I wouldn't put myself in the same class as Neil Ferguson, but I'm pretty confident that 41.7 is a bigger figure than 6.6. Indeed, between 1931, which was the peak, and 2020, there's been a 99.7% decline in the death toll from disasters around the globe. Then there's the economy. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, predicts that a global warming of 2.5 degrees centigrade to 4 degrees centigrade, between 2.5 degrees and 4 degrees centigrade, would reduce GDP by 2% to 5% by the year 2100. But that the global economy will, by 2100, that's the same period, be between 300% and 500% larger than it is at the moment. So that's another worry we can forget about. We can also forget all that rubbish about the sea rising up and swallowing millions of square miles of land. The IPCC's estimate is that sea level could rise by 2 feet by the year 2100. How much of a crisis do you think this is, given that 1/3 of the Netherlands has always been below sea level, some of it 60 feet below sea level? The fact is that there isn't any scientific proof that if the planet is getting warmer, then the warming is man-made. You'd think that if there were any such evidence, the climate change nutters would make it available, wouldn't you? I apologise if all these facts rather spoil a good story, but the bottom line fact is that the whole climate change malarkey is just another piece of propaganda. And it perhaps says a good deal about the whole thing that the 3 best-known spokespersons for climate change are a little Swedish girl who spent a lot of time not going to school, a British prince who's better known for his habit of talking to flowers than for his intellectual abilities and who forecast that the world would end years ago, a television presenter who's made a number of programmes with the BBC. To those we can add an assortment of slightly hysterical priggish children who are enjoying the freedom to join a campaign about which they seem to know absolutely nothing, the usual crew of lovies and what seems to be the entire editorial staff of the BBC, who seem happy to give airtime to any minor celebrity or pseudoscientist who's prepared to enthuse about the dangers of climate change while denying any airtime at all to scientists who bravely refuse to follow the official BBC line. Climate change enthusiasts have promoted their cause by throwing bombs at policemen, by holding demonstrations designed to block the traffic and pollute the air, and by forging documents purported to give their spurious arguments some sort of a scientific basis. I'd love to interview Greta about climate change. Perhaps the BBC would like to set it up. Or perhaps they wouldn't. Thank you for watching An Old Man in a Chair, and thank you for all your support and encouragement. Please copy and share the videos on Twitter and Facebook, from which I'm banned. Let's spread the truth. If you'd like to put on a translation, that would be great. If my videos disappear, then please go to my website to find out where you can see them. The transcripts of all my videos, including the banned ones, are always on my website, www.vernoncoleman.com. This channel has not been monetized. I haven't authorized any advertising or any sponsorship. If you'd like to see more videos from me, then please subscribe to my channel, because the videos have a strange habit of disappearing and they're not always easy to find. Thank you for watching.